Yeah, Joe Collin with Origins, and I work with David and the Shippers Alliance. I'm also working on some aquaculture strategy work with groups in the state. And I guess I just want to reiterate that last point, because what I really appreciated about your presentation, John, is about the economic impact that the Great Lakes has for the nation, for the world, and really a thriving and healthy ecology or ecosystem is only going to exist in the context of a thriving economy. So how do we build the two together?
And vice versa.
And vice versa, right. So how do we, quote, using a water analogy, float all ships higher in the context of what we're doing here in the Great Lakes? And I think that's the challenge. And quite frankly, I think there's a lot of opportunity there too. So that's just a comment.
Was that a water level question? No, keep on.
Well, yeah, we do want to.
Sorry.
I give it to.
I will say, with the discussion of water levels, I told John this, I have a new appreciation for rainy days and snow and ice, and I think this is happening here and it's not happening down south in Florida, and we're so fortunate to have this rain. Any precipitation is good precipitation, right, John?
I'm happy on those ones.
Jennifer and Michael, I know you would agree. Mm-hmm. There's a question in right here.
I didn't plan to talk about fracking, but we heard a lecture on fracking, and those companies required 3 million gallons of water. 3 million gallons of water in order to do the fracking, and the water goes down with a bunch of chemicals and comes out, and the water can't be used. It's deadly stuff. So it seems to me that they're going to need water from someplace in order to do all this fracking that is being discussed.
I'm taking note. Our next forum will be on fracking. We need that public discussion. There's so much that we don't know.
Yeah, but
as a consumer.
I was just thinking they might get the water from the Great Lakes. Yeah. Because the lakes around them might not sustain them.
But whether it's groundwater or surface water, river, lake, or Great Lakes water, it is all connected. And we understand and we recognize the connectivity of water as really one of the defining elements of Michigan's natural history.
Okay.
Right? Groundwater flows into streams, streams support fish. All the way through the system ultimately show up in the Great Lakes. So that connected piece is really an important part of Michigan's viewpoint on water.
I got a couple other things. In the 1950s, there were a lot of ocean ships that came to Detroit and hauled goods from Europe and all over. And I haven't seen many of those ships lately in the last few years. The other thing is, when you look at a map of Michigan, there are no icons around the whole state. It's just, and it seems to me what we need to build are some destination places. I know Traverse City is there and so on, but somehow we need, when you look at Ohio, you've got Cleveland, Toledo, and Cincinnati. It's sort of a triangle, and Columbus. Mm-hmm. But we have not developed the state beyond the southern part, it seems. It's, good for people who like the wilderness, I suppose. Also, along the Detroit River, there's a huge plot of land where a huge amusement park could be built. And that would be right on the river, and the river is beautiful. And I think something like that ought to be developed. Originally, I was an immigrant from Norway. And when I was a kid, we were fascinated by Indians. And we were wondering whether the feathers grew out of their heads or not. But it has occurred to me that we got Disney World, and I was wondering if we couldn't build an Indian world here. And because people in Europe are assassinated by Indians, and there's a tremendous amount of things that the Indians could contribute.
Great ideas come from these forums.
Hi, my name is Terry Sable. I'm a Muskegon County Commissioner, and one of the things that we are in the process of doing, and we will do, is to develop our port of Muskegon to make that one of the premier deep water ports on the west side of Michigan. But in order to do that, we have some issues when it comes to ballast water and the treatment and disposal of that ballast water. Can anybody speak on that and where we've come with that to make that happen?
You want to start there?
I know that, I mean, I'm not super familiar with the latest technology with regards to treatment of ballast water. I know it's advanced a great deal. I know that the regulations on exchange of ballast water for ocean-going vessels are pretty strict now. One of the issues that I believe still kind of complicates the ballast water issue is what you do with vessels that are just moving within the Great Lakes, and what rules or restrictions they have on the exchange or discharge of their ballast water. And there's also, I believe, remains a bit of an issue with vessels that enter the Great Lakes that are stated to have no ballast on board at the time, and yet their ballast tanks can sometimes contain organisms in the very bottom of the ballast tank that are an issue. I confess that this is not my area of expertise, so I may be a bit out of date in the technology. I don't know if Jennifer and John have anything to add to that, but I mean, I think it would be fair to say that the ballast water issue is not totally resolved in terms of eliminating the threat of invasive species from ballast water.
Let me take another add on to that, if I will. So we continue to be concerned with invasive species, and ballast water has historically been one of the dominant pathways of invasive species. I think that's pretty well recognized. So there are two federal standards now that really control for ballast water that will be coming on as time progresses. So the Coast Guard has a standard for ballast water discharge, and the EPA just issued its permit called the Vessel General Permit, and that Vessel General Permit is now fairly closely harmonized with the Coast Guard standard. But it requires ballast water discharges to meet put technologies on to meet a certain standard of discharge, and also do a open water exchange. So those two things are required under the Vessel General Permit, which we see as really good moves. This is good progress nationally. So now we're really looking for harmonizing national standards and harmonizing Great Lakes standards. Michigan has had a ballast water standard, but Michigan's ballast water standard was put in place in the mid-2000s because we were continuing to be concerned about the introduction of invasive species and the economic consequence that we talked about. So I think over time you're going to see a clearing of discordance, of differences of opinion around ballast water as we head further and further into the effectuation of federal standards. The trick is going to ultimately be how Canada comes into so they ratified an international standard, but that international standard doesn't actually go into place until 35% of worldwide trade countries ratify, and 30 countries or more ratify. Right now, we're sitting at 36 countries, but only 29% of worldwide trade. So right now, even though Canada has ratified this IMO treaty, it is not effectuated in Canada yet. So we're still looking to make sure that we harmonize ballast water standards. The best thing for the Great Lakes region ultimately is to have a standard that is protective of the Great Lakes, as we all would hope for, but also that harmonizes so shippers know what they have to do. Shippers need to know what certainty they have before they want to invest either $100,000 or $1 million. So we're trying to find a way to make sure that we harmonize those so ports like Muskegon know how to move ahead. And there's some things we can talk about, whether that can be sort of onshore or on-ship types of treatment technologies, and I know Muskegon's been looking at both, or at least at one in particular. So been following you guys pretty closely.
Dr. Johns, I think last year Michigan State had been working on some research where they use pheromones and hormones to attract and repel sea lamprey. And I was wondering if you could speak about that and possibly give some ideas, or how can that be transferred to other areas of invasive species?
Thank you. A question that's actually in my comfort zone. Yeah, in fact, we have been in my department, we have a couple of lines of really exciting research related to using these, as you say, chemical attractants and repellents, pheromones and other substances that research has shown are very, very effective at influencing the behavior of lampreys. So there are pheromones that lampreys use to find mates and find streams to reproduce in, and we've discovered what those pheromones are. We're working on synthesizing them so that we could use them to actually attract lampreys into traps and be much more effective and much less destructive in terms of the ways in which we control sea lampreys. More recently, there's been a discovery that lamprey also release a substance that is very effective at deterring other lamprey. It's essentially a repellent. Injured lamprey release this substance, and it's sort of telling their other individuals to avoid the area because bad things are happening here. And this substance, which we haven't identified yet, but is could prove to be even more effective at basically keeping lampreys out of habitats where they would otherwise reproduce and continue to cause the problem. The nice thing about these are naturally occurring compounds. They're part of the natural biology of the species, so we're not using, as we do right now, we wouldn't be using chemicals that are not natural to kill lampreys. We'd be using their own naturally occurring compounds to control them. So we're really excited about the potential for that. As to the application of these ideas to other invasive species, it's a pretty active area of research with carp, and common carp as well as Asian carp. But we have a lot longer to go, a lot further to go to get to the point where we see potential for using pheromones for management of other fish. As you know, I think pheromones are used for insect pest management a lot. So thank you for bringing that up. It's a really exciting and promising area of future management of the one invasive species in the Great Lakes that we actually have a means of controlling.
Are you in favor of closing the Illinois River and the Great Lakes?
Yes.
The question was, are you in favor of closing the Illinois River off to the Great Lakes?
The connection between Lake Michigan and the Illinois River, that's what you're referring to? Yeah, I'm in favor of that. Personally, I think it's an absolutely essential step for us to protect the Great Lakes. Pardon me?
Will it happen?
Unfortunately, it's not up to me. I think support for it is growing, and we have, there are other strategies that are being looked at for keeping Asian carp out of the Great Lakes. The most, I don't know if I call it promising, but the most compelling one is fishing, is actually harvesting the carp out of the Illinois River to the point where we would essentially overfish them. I've been involved in some research that would suggest that has the potential to significantly reduce the risk of Asian carp getting in the Great Lakes, but there's no way it's ever going to eliminate that risk. So in my opinion, the only solution to the problem of carp and other invasive species getting into or out of the Great Lakes from the Illinois River is what is called hydrological separation. Those are the words that John used in his presentation. And closing the gap.
We have not yet found, I don't think we know of a single species invasive that has come into the Great Lakes Basin that we've been able to eradicate. So the thing we need to be the most diligent about is not getting them in the first place. Just that doesn't mean that there is not a very slow, natural introduction of new species into the Great Lakes. That is a very natural, long-term process. The introduction of species into habitats where they weren't before is a normal process of life. The speed at which that has happened in the Great Lakes have in some ways destabilized food web, the energetics of the system, the way organisms eat and reproduce, right? And who feeds on what, especially the mussels. I mean, we talk about the lamprey, which I've always found repulsive, but and other lamprey don't seem to find them repulsive. But the mussels themselves have really been pretty hard on the Great Lakes.
Okay. Well, I think we've had some very interesting conversation today. Some of the things that stand out for me, some of the good news is the Asian carp have not yet arrived. But we're fighting it all the way, exactly. There are a number of networks checking in on each other and exchanging information in order to come up with the right questions and the best information to give to decision makers. And I see that on a daily basis. We've also talked about how to manage these things, adaptive management being the term, and how important collaboration is to resolving some of the current issues of the Great Lakes, and probably helping us to understand those that we'll foresee in the future. So I also hear a plea that we reflect on these information needs. Some of your questions from the audience were excellent ones. And these are questions that we need to keep asking and address to people outside of this room. There was mention of some pilots being proposed that I think would lend tremendous information to the conversation that we had here today. And that I think the other message is that we must be diligent, that the Great Lakes is a good investment, a great item to have in your portfolio. Everyone in this room recognizes that. And so our passion, our care and concern for the Great Lakes is well worth our time and energy. I would turn to the panelists. We have a minute for a last word, and hopefully these are the words that you'll remember when you go back to your offices and to your homes. What are the closing messages? What is the call to action that you would share with our audience?
I guess I want to come back to something that I didn't talk about as much as my other two presenters did, which is, and it relates to several of your comments about issues that you're deeply concerned about, whether it's nuclear waste disposal, fracking, water levels, invasive species, whatever. I think one of the things that's really, really encouraging about the place that we live and care about is the extent to which the idea of collaboration and engagement and thinking about these problems as regional problems that span two countries and many different states and provinces, that we're doing pretty darn well there. I mean, as John pointed out, that the institutional infrastructure is complicated and busy, but it's there in ways that I suspect is not rivaled by almost anywhere else in the world. And I think we should take a no small amount of comfort in the fact that the two nations and the many states and provinces that are a part of the Great Lakes region seem to work really well together. And they've got more work to do, but I think that's a very encouraging aspect of as we struggle with these issues.
Thank you.
So I think what I would encourage us to think about and emphasize is a lot of these issues, there's multiple different ways to address them. But if we keep in mind the sort of this, what John spoke to and the value of the Great Lakes, and sort of keep that in mind as the end game and the end goal, then finding collaboratively common solution will be easier. Just recognizing that everyone's around the table is coming from different perspectives. You need to understand those perspectives and understand what people around the table need to get out of the end game in order to come to a common one. But I think it's possible if we just keep in mind the value of the Great Lakes and what it means to us over the long run.
So worldwide, we're at about 7 billion people, and estimates are that we will be about 9 billion around 2045, maybe in that time frame. But the staggering statistic for me is the estimates are that 3 billion people, let me say that again, 3 billion people worldwide over that same time frame will be entering the middle class. A billion people over the last decade or so have moved from 1 meal to 2 meals. So the world is going to be hungry. The world is going to be chasing calories, right? The world is going to be chasing water. And the relationship between water and calories is powerful. The world is also going to be looking for places to do things, to build things, to create wealth, to create value, to create quality of life. We have that capacity here. This time we have to make sure that we're doing it in concert with the capacity of the environment to give us things, right? Ores, minerals, water, etc., and the capacity to put our wastes back. We have to make sure those stay in balance. But as 9 billion people, with 3 billion people entering the middle class, there are staggering opportunities for us. So what I would say for you is to stay engaged, stay informed, and above all, understand complexity. Just talked about that. Understand complexity. There is no single solution or simple solution. We've done those already. These are complex problems in complex systems, and we have to have people engaged in complex thinking. We can solve them. We have solved them. We have to get better at solving them. So that I will leave you with. But I am very hopeful that we have what we need here in the Great Lakes Basin.
Those are great words to leave you with. Thank you very much. All of you, very well said. Thank you to our panelists. It's been another great forum, a great discussion. Our next forum is planned for May 15th, and it's going to be on entrepreneurship or the barriers to entrepreneurship in the Detroit and in urban areas. So I hope to see you then. You have an evaluation form in your packet. We do read those. We pay close attention to them. I think I can envision a few suggestions for future forums on our sheets this afternoon. So again, I want to thank so much our panelists and their dedication to the Great Lakes and doing these kinds of things, the public education type forums. So thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.